I apologize for any mispronunciations in this video. I just watched Ne Zha 2, but before that I watched Ne Zha 1, which was released in 2019, and the differences between these two films are pretty insane. First off, I thought Ne Zha 1 was an okay film. The animation is pretty rough at times, and the story is predictable and a little bit generic. Just a typical story about someone who's destined to be evil and turns out to save the world. There are also a lot of kids' jokes, a lot of fart jokes that are kind of shoved down your throat in the first one, and it's not as prevalent in the second one, so I'm definitely thankful for that. The build up to the final act of the first film is also dragged out a lot. They really wanted to show the audience that Ne Zha is seen as a demon and is ridiculed by the town, but they show us that throughout the entire film, and to a certain point, it gets sort of redundant. And it's also hard to sympathize with Ne Zha when we only ever see him acting out and misbehaving in the first film, and we don't see him doing any good until the very end. So we're mainly just sympathizing with him because he's getting bullied, but he hasn't shown any light side until the end. If there is any redeeming part of the first film, it's that the final act is actually amazing. The animation somehow looks incredible in the final battle. So in that way, it was worth it for the long build up to see Ne Zha's redemption, but I still thought the build up was a little bit dragged out. But I still liked the ending a lot, and I thought it was a strong building off point for the next film. And yeah, I won't lie, Ne Zha 2 is just so much better than Ne Zha 1 in almost every single aspect. It's incredible how much better the character writing is, the story is, the animation, especially the animation. It's come a long way over 6 years, and it's paid off. The work that the animators did, I mean, it looks incredible. Definitely one of the top animated films I've seen in this decade, just in terms of style and fluidity and everything. And a nice thing about the second one is that it starts off by summarizing what happened to the first one. So if you didn't watch the first one, it's not the end of the world, although I would say it would help with understanding everything that's going on. And while the animation is very good, the film does indulge in its animation at some points. There is a lot of slow-mo in this film, and maybe an excessive amount, which drags the movie out to be pretty long. The film is 2.5 hours, which is pretty long for an animated film, and you can tell the film knows that its animation is really good. It's gluttonous with how it shows the audience just how cool everything looks in this world, and sometimes that leads to really long scenes with really cool animated sequences, and sometimes it drags out the film, but usually it's just really cool to see some awesome animation. I also really like the writing better in the second one. I think the characters are just way more interesting. I actually like Ne Zha. I don't find him as annoying. He's kind of just cute and endearing at times. And his relationship with his mother is more fleshed out. It was pretty fleshed out in the first one, but I really liked how they built off of that. And also how the mother's story goes. I thought that they did a really good job with Ne Zha's parents, and there were some surprising characters as well that I really enjoyed. In particular, I thought that Sheng Gongbao was a standout character, and I probably butchered that name, but he just has a lot more character traits in this film than the first one, and we actually get to see a lot more of his backstory and his relationships with other characters in a more meaningful way that just fleshes out his character way better. And he was just a super well written character in this film, and probably my favorite character now of the two films. And this character is very tragic. Like, a lot of messed up stuff happens to him in this film, and it is kind of upsetting that he gets sidelined in the final act, and we don't really see him until the very end again. Just because he's very crucial to this story. But I'm hoping that he plays a more prominent role in the third one. Overall, this film is a lot more mature than the first one. There are some serious death scenes in this film that you wouldn't see in a typical kids movie. So in that way, it separates itself from the first one, and we get to see how Ne Zha reacts to these deaths and responds, and it's pretty heartbreaking. And there are a lot more emotional story beats, and the score helps with the emotional scenes. I thought the score is just excellent. The score alone could make me cry during certain scenes. It's just a really beautiful soundtrack. This film also has a decent amount to say about demons and prejudice and wealth and how it can corrupt and how power can corrupt. I do have a couple problems with the second one. One plot point that spent a decent amount of time on is that Ne Zha could die and he's being careless with his body. And at the end of the film, they revealed that he wasn't really threatened at all and is just invincible. So I thought it was interesting why they would try to convince the audience into thinking that Ne Zha was in any real danger. I also have an opposite problem with the second one than the first one. I thought that the final act of the second one was slightly weaker than the first one, and ultimately it comes down to the final battle. I thought the final battle was visually enough, but it is kind of just like dots flying at each other, and the final fight between the main heroes and the villain is also lackluster a little bit. I thought the final fight in the first film was actually a lot stronger and a lot more creative, but maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just personal preference. Although the film is very long, I thought that the structure of the story was way better in the second one. I'm glad to see more of an adventure in this one where Ne Zha gets to go through a bunch of trials, and we get to see him fight a bunch of bosses like it's a video game. I thought that was very cool. This whole story kind of felt like we were watching a video game. The visuals are pretty insane, and honestly, the second boss fight was the best boss fight. It just had the best action scenes, and I thought the characters were a little bit more engaging to watch. And yeah, there's a twist in this film, and I thought it was done pretty well. I thought just overall the story was just a lot better, but they didn't pull any punches with the action either. The action is generally a lot better in this one too, and the animation in every aspect is a lot better. I would just say that sometimes the film is a little bit gluttonous with its animation. It knows how good it looks, and it spends some extra time in scenes that could probably be cut down a little bit, so the film is not dragged out as much. This movie also still has its fair share amount of childish moments, of goofy little scenes, and I don't think it takes away from the story at all. I thought they were handled pretty well, and they did cut into some serious moments, but I didn't think that they took anything away from those scenes, even if there were like big battle fight scenes. I thought this film was decently funny, at the very least, and sometimes it was laugh out loud funny. So I really enjoyed how they handled the humor in this film compared to the first one. Overall, the film is pretty great. I really enjoyed this one, and I thought it was a drastic improvement upon the first one, and it gets me excited to see what they'll do next for the third one.